In the last decade, the gender divide between men and women has become wholly apparent in all levels of Western society. In the last 5 years, what became apparent in the last decade has been cemented as fact in the cultural reality of everyone who finds themselves living in a Western nation. Distinctions and radical divides have been drawn in the sand, and the solutions to the separation of the genders is not readily apparent. A host of issues play into this cultural quandary, ranging from the political, religious, sexual, and hierarchical, parental, etc. I think the core crux of the problem is that this singular issue is plagued by a large swath of other issues. The gap between men and women is a downstream problem from the more focal issues plaguing our world. When both genders are struggling to make a living to support their families on dual incomes, when the bulk of young people cannot afford to buy their first home, when men and women are finding their footing in separate political spheres, or when women have an inflated sense of what they bring to a marriage, leading to a sense of being owed a certain class of man, and when young men largely view both marriage and women as a whole more in terms of a liability than a blessing to be attained in life, problems abound. One could unendingly list a spectrum of issues that afflict the contrast between genders, but such a list would be ponderously large and not conducive to this forum. The issue has been bricked and laid upon the foundations. What lays before us is a hard road to find an equilibrium of personal interaction between the two sexes, where both are formed into their distinct God-given attributes, wholly masculine and wholly feminine, in the array of pathways that can take, without falling into the extreme ditches of either where blame, hatred, and sin abounds, or to the abhorrent stream where the fundamental nature of one's biological sex is denied altogether. We must ask, how did we get here? Where do we go from where we now stand? And what would God have us do in a fallen world where the pathways to gender extremes are myriad? So as we look out, we ask, how is a Christian to respond to the gender gap we see widen day by day? Welcome to Up+Out, a show of honest questions and earnest answers. To my left I have Zander, and to my right I have Sam. We're asking, how should Christians respond to the widening gender gap? I feel as Christians we have answers and solutions, but I also don't think it's not an easy solution. It's not an easy problem to find solutions for.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where I think we're fighting against culture the hardest still. But for a lot, I think that my out will also have a good bit of this when we get to it later this season. But it is very touchy. This one is. Yeah.
Might get some.
So many concessions have already been made to this end. You know,
concessions given and then granted.
Yes, we've volunteered so much as churches.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I guess just with the phases of feminism, which I couldn't necessarily articulate all of them and how they're defined, but it's obviously been a huge societal impact. And then, you know, as all things, the church is want to follow society just in arm's width away. And so as society progresses, the church progresses, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I think we see a lot of breakdowns of value of what is assumed within gender roles. I guess to loosely iterate some of the waves of feminism, it was like equal rights.
Well, first the vote. Suffrage was first.
Well, wasn't it the same?
It's a little bit different than that, because that technically, like, equal rights for women, I believe, trailed the Civil Rights Act a little bit.
Okay.
For like full, like Title IX, I think followed. Right, it was part of the Civil Rights Act. Did I know that? I'm not sure.
I could look it up, but I guess to that end, like the second wave really brought in a lot of like implied equality. You know, women were going to work, women were, you know, equally capable of everything the same way men were. Mm-hmm. And even with our generation and what we see in conversations today, there's a lot of assumption that men and women are wholly equal. And as we see in the Bible, I just don't think that's really the case. And I think that's part of the beauty of what God created. I think there's a trapping where some people have made that out to be a subservience. Mm-hmm. But in actuality, it should be quite a complementary relationship between, men and women, husband and wife specifically. Mm-hmm. And we see, even within the church, a probably knee-jerk reaction that pushes against that.
There's also like a breakdown of distinctions that I think leads to both genders being in a place where they don't understand the rules of the game. It feels like a very Jordan Peterson idea to say that like the structures that define the relationships between men and women for like the last couple hundred years, mm-hmm. that losing those has like thrown out the rules of play between the two genders. And then when you couple that with the I brought up a lot of there's a host of issues that play into this topic.
Right.
But where the loneliness epidemic leaves both genders so separated from each other, like I would say there's a whole generation of people that are so separated from each other that they don't fully understand how to engage and act with one another. And then you have the added, on top of that, the two genders being combative to one another.
Yeah.
And a lot of this might also just is exasperated by the online space and
for sure
the online reality. But I feel like we live in a space now where online reality soaks into and becomes part of like the actual reality in which people live out their lives. There's a lot right there. But.
Yeah, it's it has become very antagonistic, and each side has its own fringe that is just not helpful. Mm-hmm. Like there's on the women's side, it's just the radical feminists who say, what is it? A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Mm-hmm. That's the classic idiom that's silly. And de Beauvoir, is that from de Beauvoir?
No Maybe. Idea.
Simone de Beauvoir. You don't know Simone de Beauvoir? And then on the guys' side, they've invented their own because they felt left out. And they've got the MGTOW. Men go their own way.
Like the manosphere guys.
Yeah. It's all part of the manosphere. I don't even call them red pill. I call them black pill because they're so down on monogamy in general. And I think that from the MGTOW perspective, it is a logical conclusion of an amoral society, mm-hmm. right? Where like it's just natural biology. Men are supposed to go out and sow their seeds among as many women as possible. Mm-hmm. Just that's how biodiversity works, and that's how it's supposed to work for guys. Women, it doesn't make any sense biologically. But none of it makes sense morally, mm-hmm.
Which is the key component in all of it, is that both of them are their own extremes, and in being extremes, they are both wrong. Mm-hmm. Because, as you've said, that it's a complementary relationship. It's supposed to be a complementary relationship between the two, because I know that there are certain facets in a relationship that I would not be adept at bringing to fruition. Mm-hmm. But there are things that I can do. Theoretically, of course, at the moment. But bringing the online into it, it does allow you to be siloed, and it's a lot of clickbait, right? So mm-hmm. who knows how much they believe what they're saying, especially from the male side of things. I think from the women's side, the indoctrination is so deep that they actually believe that to a certain extent until they get, mugged on the side of the road, and they're like, oh boy, I wish I had a man around.
Both sides are like, those two ditches are both abhorrent in their own way, but there's an element to like you said, I feel like the women actually believe what they're saying, and that part scares me a little more.
For sure, yeah, because as part of this gender divide, women are more emotionally driven mm-hmm. in their logic and persuasion than mm-hmm. men are. So if they are convinced of something, it is much harder convince them otherwise, because you can't say like, well, A, B, B, C, A, C. Cause in most instances, it was not in most instances, but in emotionally fraught instances, it may not work as simply as that.
We exist in like a community that has like moral framework, and like we've grown up with like that being a part of our lives. To be a person that exists outside of that, it doesn't have that rigidity to their own moral compass, or a lack of faith that those around them have that rigidity. I understand how a person in that place would not want to engage on either side of that coin, whether you be a man or a woman, not wanting to jump into like people talk about it all the time about like how much of a cesspool modern dating is.
Yeah.
And it's all just a mess. And I don't know how that solves. What gives me hope on this topic is the idea that I think people are seeing the problems. Like, I feel like as a society, we're very aware of what the problems are to a lot of these issues, but don't exactly know the pathway to solve them. And I like to solve these problems takes like a large collective effort of people choosing in their individual lives to swim the other way.
And it plays a lot into the online as well, because we are, I don't know if we have diagnosed the problems, but we have certainly diagnosed the symptoms. So there's a fertile field for complaints out there in the modern world. And online, social media is full of complaints, not of solutions. People complain, point out flaws in modern society without providing any solutions, any feasible solutions.
In one of my notes I have that I jotted down earlier, is that both men and women have valid arguments against the other gender, the other sex. But I think I feel like the true moral decision on either side of that coin is to step into that cesspool, despite the complaints you may have. I feel like I'm not
I don't know if I agree with that, though. Because I think that the best way to meet someone is in person in your community. So it's...
But that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's people who are that won't take that step because of like maybe they're living too much in that online space. I feel like people allow themselves to not choose to live life because of absorbed or imagined fears. Like, for an example, the whole global warming, everything's ending, everything's terrible, like, there's wars, the world's falling apart, so why have kids? Yeah. And I feel like the moral choice you have to make is you do it anyway, because that's what makes you human. And that's how you find purpose and fulfillment in your life. And the people will be like, well, there's other ways to find purpose and fulfillment. But like, I'm trying to figure out how to communicate where I'm coming at on this end. Because I feel like what you just said, that we're on the same page. Like, I agree, like, people need to step into their community and seek out those real life interactions. But I feel like there's for a certain group of people or a certain age group, that there's a lot of fear involved in that says, why even try? Why bother? Like, for the manosphere guys, it's like, she's just going to divorce you and take all your money and leave you with nothing.
Yeah, I think you see this breakdown of the value of the differences we bring, and the truth is that with those differences, what you often see is hand in hand, the strengths are the weaknesses, and that's why it works so well as a complementary structure. because collectively we are covering one another. You know, my strengths are different than my wife's, and you know, thank goodness for that, right? Thank goodness we're not exactly the same, functioning exactly the same, thinking exactly the same, because it would be horrible. But societally, we want to act like that would be a good. And I even wonder some too. My wife and I, we've talked a lot about. We have this couple we know, and they have a child together, are engaged, but may or may not actually get married. And so as Christians, like we're encouraging them to get married. But at some point, why would they? Because they're not Christians. And so then it becomes like, what is the benefit? And I think it is on us as Christians to show that moral good.
We have that positive vision, but I also feel like we don't.
To take up that thread, why should you get married if you're fine cohabiting and dating? Because what are you even doing then? What is the point of your relationship in general?
Yeah.
You have no commitment to each other, actually. And the way that some of the commentators they do it, you're play acting like you're married.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. So the fact that you won't commit actually to a relationship just shows that you don't plan to stay together.
Yeah.
So what is even the point of your relationship?
You're just wholly enjoying being consumers together.
Yeah, it's you're just pooling. You're just roommates. You're just pooling resources. Maybe you're pooling resources.
And I think that's what's funny about it, because a lot of times the argument is like, well, we want to make sure we do it the right way because we don't want to end up divorced. And it kind of, well, to me, it's like, well, statistically, you've already done it all the wrong way.
Yeah. Statistically, if you cohabit before marriage, you have a better chance of getting divorced.
Right. And so it's like the same root problem is there. You're absolutely right. There is that lack of commitment.
Yeah. I will say that there are some confounding factors to that, because the people who would tend to cohabit before being married are already of the ilk that would be divorced more, because they would be of a less religious cohort.
Right.
So all these factors are somewhat interconnected.
Yes.
But as far as doing it the right way, the right way to do it is to get married and then live together.
It's crazy how much that religious statistic plays into the whole divorce, whether like you end up divorced or not, and how like. I don't have any statistics to cite, but...
Well, the divorce statistics are all skewed because when you just look at the rate of divorce, it's very demoralizing.
Yeah.
But you should be looking at the rate of first divorce, because people who get divorced tend to get divorced again.
Yeah, just at face value, I think it's over 50% or something like that.
Yeah,
it's very close thereof.
But
last I saw.
That get divorced again?
No, just like the divorce rate is like 50%.
Yeah.
But it's like
I think
marriages
it goes higher and higher after that too. I think after you
repeat
first divorce, your
divorces.
repeat divorce is like...
Yeah, the 50% I think is just the general marriage rate to end in divorce is supposedly 50% or something like that. And first divorce, first marriage, I'm not sure what the rate is. But it is certainly higher than 50%, because a lot more people stay married than people who are on their first marriage tend to stay married. Yeah.
I think a big factor in this too is the loss of shared spaces, shared community spaces. I mean, obviously, more and more people aren't attending church.
That has reversed a little bit.
Yeah, it's starting to reverse. There's hopeful signs.
Conservative-leaning denominations and parishes.
I'm trying to think of like what would be some other shared spaces. I mean...
Well, there's so many, because like you used to go to bowling league, you used to have, used to do the Rotary Club, the Lions Club. There were social clubs that people would go to, and
I also feel like communities existed on a small enough scale that they would also have like community like
picnics.
Events.
Yeah. Yes. Urbanization has had certainly a lot of downsides, because it is sort of urbanization and then metropolitanization, where not metropolitan, suburbanization.
You have the statistic.
I do. So this is saying, as of 2024, the divorce rate tends to be between 40 and 50% of first marriages. Though they are seeing this number steadily declining over the past few decades.
The rate declining.
Declining,
more
yes.
people staying married.
And so I would take that almost to imply that it seems like the people that are actually wanting to get married are getting married and then are meaning to stay married.
Right.
And so it's kind of a false confirming statistic in a way. Like, it's not actually getting better because, like, less people are getting married in a regard.
It's a sort of self-sorting mechanism that you have to then compare the decrease in divorce rate to the number overall of marriages, because that number should continue to increase as population increases.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting polarizations I saw is that young women are more on the whole not wanting to start families, whereas like young men are starting to drift more in a direction of wanting families. And it just adds even more to the political divide between the two, where you have a lot more young men becoming religious. If that's changed, statistically, that's starting to change when in the past it's always been a majority of young women are seeking to be religious in some capacity, where you're now seeing that more young men are choosing that pathway.
That's interesting. I hadn't really heard that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what, just speculation only, I wonder what's really driving that change, except I think men have kind of lost their community.
I think it's a combination of like they've lost their community, and then also young men are seeking for any sphere they can be plugged into that calls them to something hard.
Calls them to be masculine. Like
And
religion actually wants you to be a man.
And here's the other factor leading to a lot of the negative emotions from young men is the pile-on of them being told how terrible they are.
Mm-hmm.
Just constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have too much opportunity of those modern comforts. There's really no direct need to, like, you can kind of ignore the gender differences, I guess, in that regard. Like, we have everything provided for. We're not like a primarily agricultural society. We're not really, like, we have modernized in so many ways. Like, life is really easy. There's no
You're saying that the
U.S. war
You're
that we're
saying
involved
that
in.
like those gender distinctions that were once very apparent because of like how life actually had to be lived aren't in your face anymore, because
I think we can just afford to ignore them. Like, they're still clearly there.
They're still embedded in reality.
Yeah, like we can't say they're not. Mm-hmm. But we now have the ability to...
Doesn't stop people from trying.
Right. People are trying, but now we kind of can choose to pretend they're not there.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. That people act as though life should not be hard anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so when we ask men to do hard things, they then buck and say, well, life isn't... Why is life hard still? Essentially. So there's a strange victim mentality that comes into play when it comes to it because of that pile-on. It's sort of come to so far on the other side of it that now they perceive everything as a pile-on and say that now, well, just society is against me as a whole. And that then causes them to become even more encapsulated within themselves and cut off from even attempting to stake a place stake a traditionally masculine stake in society. Mm-hmm. What did I say? Stake twice?
No.
To make a place for themselves in society that's traditionally masculine, rather than in this sort of... I'm trying not to use words I used in the last episode.
Just go for it. Just do it. Just use them.
Solipsistic deracinating. In this cut-off sort of self-contained personhood. The Sigma sort of vibe that you get from a lot of things, where like the abbreviation encapsulates well. Ming go their own way, and MGTOW. that they are so much victim that they've just decided to cut everything else off.
There's such a emphasis of the lone wolf.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sad existence. I mean, what we've seen generation over generation is that the satisfaction within the genders is like declining. Like there is a lack of fulfillment. There is a lack of purpose in a lot of ways, and that correlates very well with the decline of marriages, and then therefore also of having children.
It actually goes back to a discussion that we were having in an episode last season. I believe it was the purpose of the church. We were talking about the traditional like Lone Star, the cowboy, and you said that he is not a good example. But then I brought it around and said that, well, in the hero of those westerns, the man goes out alone to protect something bigger. He's always in search of doing that, and they're sort of taking the go out alone
in service to a thing behind him.
Right. In service to, it depends on
the
movie,
greater good.
It's for the town. It's for my family. It's for something else.
It's a sacrificial
what's
move.
What's the C.S. Lewis quote? It's like it just applies to so well to what you're saying. I gotta figure out. You keep going.
Well, yeah. So they are taking that lone wolf. That Lone Ranger, that man on the frontier personality, but making it totally self-motivated.
Yes, it becomes selfish.
And guess what you become in that instance then? You become the villain of that same story.
Right.
The man who's only after things for himself. You become the main character of Blood Meridian in the first... I haven't finished the book yet, so I don't know if he turns it around eventually. But certainly through the first half of the book.
Sorry, not
he's
C.S.
unnamed.
Lewis.
That's why I didn't. He's unnamed in the book.
It's a Chesterton one.
Ah.
And it's the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and I think you see that in war stories. The superhuman feats that are recounted, that people are so motivated by what they love, and it's such a masculine trait, like the ability to really lay down your life for family, country, what have you, your faith. And I think it was on the, or maybe it was more of a joke. I don't remember quite how it goes, but it is essentially how all the women and children were loaded onto the rafts on the Titanic, and the men were left. And there's kind of a right because we're men, yeah, but they're staring down imminent death and an absolute demise, and so. Without slipping into over romanticization of that, I think we perceive less opportunities to sacrifice because we are less rooted, because we don't have those investments in the community, and because we're not pursuing the commitments that really value, such as marriage, children.
I think the disheartening thing is that a lot of those true loves, those things you're referencing, the love of God, the love of country, the love of family, all those things have been whittled down and dissolved. Put on my conspiracy hat and purposefully dissolved.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's a conspiracy.
Have been purposely dissolved to where people. You said it's changing, but
well,
largely
it's a whole goal.
People don't have God. Their
Marx?
Families are in ruins.
Was it Marx that said that the greatest threat to communism is the family?
And when
that sounds right.
When you don't have those things in a person's life, the structure is not there for that man to stand on the boat knowing he's going to die to save the lives of the women and children.
Well, it is, as you mentioned in your intro, there's so many avenues that you can go down. And I think I don't want to go too far down the family road because we're talking about the gender gap here.
Yeah.
because I want to make a point about like people talking about how we've diluted down the family. Like, you used to live like where your family was and just kept living there.
Yeah.
But now it's like, what do you mean you're moving home after college?
Yeah.
What do you mean you're going back home? And there's, as much as there's always been, I feel like somehow there's even more of a pull to the coast, to the big cities, where like that's where young people are supposed to live.
You're almost seen as a failure. If like you said, like they talk to you like, "Oh, you're going back home."
Yeah.
Like, what went
What do you mean
wrong?
you're going back home?
I experienced that in my life.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned
I
that
left
before.
Indianapolis, and when I went to come back, which was largely motivated by my career, my dad just asked why. He was like, "What is there? What is there in Indianapolis?" And in my case, I was like, "Well, actually, Indianapolis has a wonderful tech industry,
Yeah.
and being in computer science, that was a no-brainer without having to also take on huge cost of living elsewhere."
Yeah, like people complain about how young people complain about how they can't afford to live in a home, how they can't afford to buy their own home. And I'm saying, well, then change where you're living. Because there are places where you can go and buy affordable homes. You just don't want to live there for whatever reason. Because there's not, a sushi place, a burger bar, and like a good coffee shop within walking distance. Like, okay, I mean...
This is where I think we are overly comfortable, because it is just a lot of grumbling, and
Yeah.
it's not any solutioning.
Yeah.
It's just whining for the sake of whining, and you're not really working to make it better.
I think that's what I was trying to communicate earlier, is that people have to just like, you just got to let that go, and you got to push beyond that. It's easy to hold grievances. It's not easy to be justified in your grievances and choose to push forward despite them and not let them
I think-
define you.
I think I want to go ahead and respond to some of the comments that we're getting. Like, well, we talked about how you're bashing men and then you're just bashing men. I'm like, well, okay, we're not. I think we're trying to get you to recognize that life is not easy, even if you're living it right. Like there are still challenges in life, even if you've done everything appropriately.
Absolutely.
And anticipating that your life is going to be easy when you haven't even made the right steps in the right direction, is. You're just expected to be spoon-fed your entire life, and who's going to do that for you? Who's going to do that for you? In general, if you don't have like super rich parents who want to give you everything in the world, then like, what is your plan to actually survive and live and then thrive, possibly, in the end?
Well, I do think this is actually one thing that we, as Christians, often fail to remember, is that we should be living fearlessly. We should be filled with hope, being saved by Christ. And so I think with so much reluctance to take those risks, in a lot of cases small risks, to go and engage and be rooted and invest and potentially lose something along the way, what we're doing here on our podcast is, increasing our view to the world, is putting us in the crosshairs of anybody that wants to, rebuke what we say or what have you. There's a risk to it, but I don't think you can live with so much fear that you don't live.
Yeah, fear is the mind killer, as the Moedeep would say, from Dune, the Dune quote. Okay.
Can I divert our discussion a little bit?
Do you want to talk about women now?
Yeah. So we beat up on the guys. Now.
Beat up on the
Time to
guys
Beat up
now,
on the
yeah.
women.
There will be no beating women
In
this.
verbal,
Intellectually.
No women were harmed
We're
in
going
the
to
creation
discuss-
of this podcast.
Go ahead, beat up on the women.
So especially in like churchy, Christianese, evangelically spaces, I feel women have to a certain extent been coddled.
Yeah.
Have been it's the whole like, you've mentioned it before, the whole like a little girl's a princess and can do no wrong, and the boys need to like
grow up,
calm down,
Yeah.
and grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, sit still, be quiet.
And it's like women are just as capable of sin as men are, and in the church we don't like to point that out, or like it's very easy to like. I don't know if it's because men receive it better, receive it more constructively. The finger in the chest, like man up, be better, and whereas women, I'm generalizing very largely right now, but don't receive that kind of criticism as constructively.
Well, here's how I've heard it put. I've heard it put that you get to Mother's Day and the sermon at church will be like, let us remember our moms. Let's remember the women in our lives and what they sacrifice. And
All
wow,
they've done,
aren't
yeah.
our moms wonderful? And then you get to Father's Day, and Father's Day's sermon goes, hey guys, let's be better.
Yeah.
Why aren't we better? You should be better because that would be better.
and here's a tie.
Then yeah.
Or a mug.
And I think there's
Or socks,
like
if you're into socks,
an overly
a wallet.
lopsided treatment, and that I think that coddling is very fair.
So I want to take a step back. I think that it is a natural influence that is taken advantage of, because this whole thing is about the difference between men and women. So I think that there is a different tack that you have to take with.
There's a natural
As you're raising
there's a
girls.
natural desire to protect women that's justified, but
Yes,
it can also
yes.
be abused
Right.
by women.
I think that it is
Yes.
a natural impulse that is being taken advantage of because of the overarching currents in culture.
I'm sure none of these dynamics played out whatsoever with my wife and you growing up.
No.
No. You and Nick were never yelled at for...
No. No, I don't have any scars.
And,
I
like-
don't have any scars. And she was a teenager.
It's a both and thing where like...
You have to figure out how to find the similar severity but different method.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great way of putting it, because it does warrant the differences inherent to our
Yeah.
sexes warrants a different response,
Right.
but does require that similar proportionate.
Is it just because
Severity.
the response to that is more complicated to pursue, so a lot
It
of people
certainly
don't?
is. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah, like,
it's far easier to just go, no, don't do that.
yeah. And
easy.
you have to follow through on it, which a lot of people hate doing as well. Like,
That requires
theory's so
effort
great.
and diligence and
And conviction.
Yeah. And you have to, it's stick-to-itiveness, that wonderful created word. It's just, we're different, so you have to figure out how to do it appropriately but differently. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't have any kids. So I don't have a good way to tell you how to punish them.
that's an episode for another day.
How to
Yeah,
punish how
that's
should
the whole
Christians punish their children? That's the whole episode.
Is that enough?
That's a good question. I don't know.
If you frame it as Christian punishment, I feel
How
like it's
should-
enough. If it's
yeah.
just like a how do you discipline your kids, I feel
That-
how should society discipline the kids is
Yeah.
an out.
Yeah. How should we could do it either way.
could-
We'll do one of both.
You could spin it, yeah.
Do we have anything else to like harp on this topic between like the differences in genders and any of those avenues? I feel like it started really dark. I picked such a joyful topic to cover.
I picked the fun one.
I feel like it gets dark just because it's a topic that's so inundated by cultural problems that
Yeah.
it can like you fall into a place of like, oh, civilization is really falling apart before our eyes.
All right, so what do we say to young women? Because we've talked about our young men. We've talked about our very young women. We've talked about children.
I think we have similar solutions, frankly. I think there requires a rootedness. The Bible tells older women to mentor the younger women, and the young women should leverage that mentorship. You know, I think,
Or even like be interested at all in it.
yes, and I think in a lot of ways we aren't using the tools that God has given us. And so we have these great church communities that we can be part of, and we're not using it to its fullest. There are words of wisdom that we can learn from the older men in church. There's words of wisdom that the young women can learn from the older ladies at church. And I think we should be similarly on both sides, rooted in our communities, living out our faith. I think a good illustration for marriage is like run as hard as you can to God. And as you're running, to look left and look right and find somebody that's running just as hard as you are, and grab hold and run together. And so I think that, one, that puts so much emphasis on God, and two, because together, a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken.
To echo what you've been saying, I feel like to both genders, they need to live from a place of forgiveness and choose to seek God and engage each other despite actual grievances that either side may hold. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that just applies to like just living life in general, no matter what the topic is. Because life is inherently hard, and there will be actual grievances and there will be actual problems, but it's our job to, I don't want to say come together, to aim for the greater good, to aim up. It's like the whole sin thing is to miss the mark, and you have to keep aiming up towards the mark, to God, as your echo you, that to continue to pursue God and to live in a rooted place of forgiveness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have anything to complain about, I guess I'm technically in this cesspool of the modern dating scene. So
I wasn't gonna poke my finger at you or anything.
Go ahead. I'm the one who's failing in that regard.
He's single.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody is just thrilled to hear that. All 7 of our viewers.
Leave your info.
I wouldn't do that because I'm pretty sure YouTube comments get scraped for
Leave
AI
your daughter's
training,
info.
So like, don't put that.
Yeah.
No, don't do that either. But my phone number. So I have more experience, and I guess I have. You guys don't have any experience
in the
dating
modern
apps.
dating. No.
Yeah,
No.
you guys actually did it the right way.
Just straight.
Yeah. So my question for you is, why do all women love to travel now?
You brought this up recently.
Yeah, because it really bugs me. Because all it says to me is that you're not fiscally responsible. That's all it says to me.
How did I hear this?
I feel like it's
about travel came up recently.
It's such an aesthetic thing. I feel like it's part of like.
Yeah,
women have a certain level of being ingrained in
it's narcissism.
It speaks so much to who you are as a person. If like one of the only things you're going to tell me about yourself is that you love to travel, like.
It also feels
you also had better be
6
feet tall, make 6 figures, and
got one of those. Don't have that second one.
There's another point that is like the go-to list of requirements.
Look like a Giga Chad.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's the third one.
You got to work on that jawline, man.
Well, it's all hidden.
Okay, that's a cheat code.
You can imagine it's in there.
Right.
See, it's like cut right there.
It's like
chiseled from marble.
It just feels so disingenuous. Like it feels like it's like it's just like what everybody says.
Yeah,
like, I love to travel.
You know what it is? It's the
you
new,
and everybody else.
It's the new. I love to take long walks on the beach. That's what it is.
Yeah,
but it's worse than that.
It is worse than that
because long walks on the beach is like
you want to be with someone.
Yeah, there's a romanticism in that, but the I like to travel is I don't have any roots and I'd rather not.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a flighty person.
Literally, because you probably aren't going to drive there.
It also implies they value experience over groundedness, if that makes sense. Like pursuing whims over groundedness, being flighty.
I think there's a lot that's tied into it, which is why it bugs me so much.
Next episode.
For me, I don't like to take photos of things that I'm doing. One, because I just don't like being in photos. Two, because
it devalues.
It doesn't devalue it. It degrades your own ability to remember the moment because you have now a visual aid. So your brain does less work to form a memory because you're like, I've got a picture of it. I can look at the picture and I can figure out what I remember from that day. But it also puts a screen between you and the world. Like it actually abstracts you from your own surroundings when you take pictures all the time. So that is obviously going to be tied in with this I love to travel sort of scenario. So, like, how do you fix that with the women? Because obviously I don't see the guy's side of these things. And probably they're all shirtless and catching, fish or whatever. I don't look like that in any of mine. Certainly not shirtless. But I would like to know what the annoying thing that guys say is. For me, it's the
I feel like they probably both have like.
I would guess that there's something about working out.
The other one is like, I hate the bio.
It's probably something along the lines of like, I love the gym, or like.
Oh yeah, gym rat, something like that. Yeah. Something about what is it? Pre-workout.
Pursuing gains.
When the pre-workout hits, I don't know. Yeah. The other one is I hate like the bio, when they just say the bio and don't put anything else. They hate because I understand that one more because the whole dating scene is like
trash.
No, you're promoting yourself. Like you're writing a classified ad for yourself.
From the get-go, you're already starting with a bad.
But if you're even intimating that you're putting out the effort of being on these applications and you put that little work into it, then like you're not seriously pursuing anything.
You're right.
From the get-go of you like calling it an ad, does it feel like super just antithetical to the way like it feels like the process is supposed to be? To like the community aspect we've brought up a couple times. I mean, I guess everybody is trying to promote themselves in some way, like with whatever talents they have.
You'd be surprised. People don't do much work. Some people don't put much work into promoting themselves. They will just have like a single picture. They're probably just a bot, and probably like a lot of these people are. I guess bots.
I'm referring to like more general, like just living. Like when you're growing up, like, I feel like. You're finding interests, like you have like something you're good at, and usually you try to leverage that to the best of your ability.
Well, in a perfect world, how should this work?
What?
The dating, marriage, courtship, You
meet in high school, or you grow up in church and you marry that person.
Or earlier.
I mean, at some point, there was a history of like, oh, hey, here, son, this is so-and-so's daughter. You know, you two go talk.
Another interesting factor in all this is like the differences between people who continue to get married young versus I feel the more common trend of people waiting until they're like in their 30s and like being established or whatever. And at least from my own perspective of getting married is like, it usually involves a bit of messiness. Like if you're getting married young, you're not entirely formed person yet.
And that's the point, I think.
Yeah. And
there's
so
a benefit in that.
Yeah. You have to innately go into it with, there's a sense of struggle that establishes itself where you are growing and becoming a unit together. Whereas if you come to this in your 30s, sorry.
I know. I know I've missed the boat.
As a fully established person with,
you have to then break down some of the things that
the old trope of the I can fix him. It's like if you're 28 and you're saying you can fix him, then you already missed the boat. You could have fixed him if he was 18.
Yeah,
but he's 31 now, and he only wears blue shirts.
I feel like I don't even want to fixate on like the people having their own individual things they need to fix, and I agree like that becomes more difficult as you get older. I think that's like they've statistically proved that it's like harder to root out your deep-seated tendencies as you get older versus when you're young. But I feel like something is missed when you maybe I'm just trying to like inflate my own like relationship,
but no, I think
is that you miss out on that growing together process.
Yes, I think that process has also become downplayed though.
Yeah,
to where you see a lot of criticism of like, oh, we just got married young. We didn't even know each other. We're like so different now.
Right.
And then they like get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's silly and flippant. And, you know, at some point you obviously didn't choose to invest and grow any, you know, together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any tolerance for that because, you know, I don't feel in love anymore, or what all the other lame statements that come along with that. And it's like, well, love is an action. You know, you love somebody.
And I'm harping on the whole young marriage thing, but like no matter when you're getting married, you're two people, as you said, becoming one flesh. No matter what stage of life you're in, there's going to be some growing pains that go into that.
You'll fight over how you load the dishwasher.
End of statement. There are some growing pains that going with that.
Yeah. How you fold the towels, and you know.
Well, there's only one way to fold towels.
I agree.
The way that I do it.
My wife disagrees.
And I feel it's like a generalization to say like people just go into marriage thinking it's going to be all great, because I feel like some people are self-aware enough to know that like that's going to be a bit of the process. But I also think there's a level of like you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know definitely for me, getting married is like there's so many things that come up that you don't expect to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for you, for example,
you're just two people raised in completely different realities,
Yes.
different families, and like a family is its own little kingdom. And you're just taking these two different kingdoms and shoving them together. We're like going into a whole marriage topic, but it does have to deal with the genders. What were you going to say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, like, for you in your case, like, how long have you known your wife? Like, just from meeting.
Forever.
Why'd you ask that? I mean, we've known each other forever.
Yeah.
Don't ask
because
me
of church.
the actual years.
Yeah. Like, that's crazy, though. Because, you know, you could then, therefore, just say how old you are.
Yeah.
But, like, for me and my wife, I'm about to be 33. We've known each other 17 years, going on 18 years this year. So I can already say I've known my wife more than half my life. And I think that's a powerful thing to be able to say, because at this point, I remember more of being with her and knowing her than I do knowing not being with her. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and that's really a gift.
Yeah.
And like I do think that is the ideal way. If you can find somebody young, grow together, make that investment. Like, that's not to say that that's easy, because there is that struggle and there is that, you know, some of it's silly, some of it's harder because you're like, oh, I deal with stuff this way from my parents, and you deal with stuff that way because of your parents, and so there's like this baggage that comes along with it. But then you grow, you mature, you get to see this individual at their best and their worst, and you know them thoroughly.
It's almost as though the people's perspective should be, don't let people tell you that you're too young.
Yes,
it's almost fully that. But there is, you touched on it earlier, that that it's like, oh, we're too young to get married. Well,
yes.
I mean, like, if you've both graduated high school, which you guys had done, you'd been out a couple. How long were you out of high school before you got married?
I'm going to add a little tack onto here, because like I have the benefit of. Sorry, I'm not going to derail your thing. Continue.
There wasn't much more to it, or I can end it there.
We got married right after high school. Like, I think we got married in 2016. We graduated in 2014.
Okay. I would have gotten married sooner, but I was strongly encouraged to get established in my career first.
And I think that's what everybody is like growing up. That's what I was told. That's what everybody was told, is like, go to college, get your job.
Right. So I think I was
don't do that.
23,
but
when we got married.
Like, I grew up, knew my
wife.
If
you find the right person, just do it.
Yeah, really. Well, and that's what's funny is that actually statistically, if you find people that say go to college and got married right after high school, on average, they both do better in school.
Yeah.
I think there can be an element of, I mean, Christians. This is a Christian podcast.
Yeah.
There's an element, at least for me, of surrendering to the will of God, the story that God has planned for your life, and it not fitting what you expect it to be. Like, I know my wife, like Zander said, growing up our whole life. We didn't get close till we got older, though, and we're like in high school. But to be vulnerable, we've looked back. I mean, from my position, myself would look back and say, if I had, I would do it again. But in the circumstances I was in, I wouldn't do it, if that makes sense. With all the problems I've had in my past, that's part of what I'm talking about, the growing together.
I think that is... I'm going to challenge you here.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a part of me that would almost say the same thing. But I think what you are doing a disservice of is you're then neglecting how much better your life is, therefore, because of Hannah.
Yeah.
Because you may not have righted yourself in order to be a better version of yourself for her. But because of her,
dead in
you
a gutter.
did. You know, and
Be straight up Edgar Allan Poe somewhere with an exploded liver.
and there's something to be said for that.
Uh-huh.
Like you just can't know.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of...
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you do get married young, like whoever's watching, I don't know, but you get married young, is like,
Wyatt.
be willing...
Who is it, Wyatt?
be willing to surrender to the messiness and prayerfully trust God.
I think it's a lot like what we've talked about before, that you often only see God in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the takeaway from you. Like, you look back and you say, I can't believe we made it through this. If I went back now knowing what I knew now, I don't know if I make the same decision, because I know it's so scary. Mm-hmm. It's like the fact that you can look back and say, that is crazy that we went through that.
Yeah. If I could be the man I am now and could go back and talk to Hannah, I would be the type of man that would tell her to run away from...
So it's...
I would be what your father was for her.
That statement makes you all the better.
Uh-huh.
And I don't have as extreme of a story, but at one point I
everybody
had broken up with my wife.
Yeah.
And in my infinite high school wisdom, I was like, oh, I'm going to college. It's out of state. I'm never going to talk to her again. Mm-hmm. We're on different paths. And then that process led me to realize I cared. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. That was I would say that is God working in my life, and I don't put much into soulmates.
I feel like,
I do feel like God puts us in these positions with the right people for us. You know, our friendship, I think, is a similar example.
I feel like God often is working in the messy situations, in the He likes to work in the spaces that we so desperately seek to have control of.
Yes.
I feel like you are operating from a place of, like, following that plan. Like, it's time to go to college. It's out of state. Got to get a job. It's, like, time to move on and, like, figure it out later.
Right.
Whereas, like, that wasn't the plan. I feel we've gotten off on a bit of a marriage topic, which, like, it has to do with genders. But I feel like the light in this portion of the episode is that us discussing our marriages and, like, the relationships therein is offering a positive vision for what the interaction between genders can look like and be.
Yeah, I think in the Bible, we're told to submit to one another. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's how we should approach the gender differences. We're also told that women should respect their husbands and husbands should love their wives. And I think that language is just so apparently intentional. We see these differences and we see these tendencies, and we are challenged to go beyond it and be the better person that our spouses need us to be. So,
I think that's it.
All right.
How are we wrapping?
Well, as always, read your Bible.
We've got stuff to plug.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm asking. Like, what do I need to plug? Like, how do you want me to plug it?
Okay, well...
You're getting upset because you just got to cut it. I'm making you do editing.
No, I'm not cutting this. I'll just do it.
Do it.
Yeah, well...
X. No, just do it. Just do it. I'm not doing it.
This is going in the outtakes.
This is good. No, this is going in the episode.
In the episode.
Check out.
It's going to be a clip.
Yeah, Up+Out on X. Up+Out Show on X. I think it's Up+Out Show on X. And on YouTube. You can search for it on YouTube. Up+Out Show.
I am very active on it. And if you want to catch spicy stuff, you got to catch it fast before he takes it down.
I have not been monitoring it recently, so there could be a lot of goodies up there.
There's one fun one on there right now.
Yes, Up+Out Show, with the and spelled out. That's what we are on basically everything, except for our Substack, which is that also Up+Out Show? Hold on, is that also Up+Out Show?
We should get better at this.
Yeah, probably should be better at this.
We should remember this because this is like season 2.
It's season 2, episode. Episode. No, this is technically episode 2 of season 2.
Anybody that's returning is here for the jank. Just
they know.
it.
This is where you get the true camaraderie of it all. Anyway, go to our Substack and subscribe. We've got our D&D podcast show episodes that are going to be coming out here on a monthly basis, starting on a date that I will not commit to yet. You have to be a paid sub to watch past the first episode. We're still figuring out what we're going to do for those of you who won't pay us money. Is it couth to talk about money in such a manner? I don't believe so, but I've done it anyways. And yeah, like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can go to X. If you want to watch on X, we post all the videos on X.
Share the video, like the video.
Share the video, like the comment on the video.
Any button you can push the button.
So comment.
If you can give me a better idea of why all women want to travel these days, leave me a comment.
Give Zander some dating advice. How can he
I did not ask for
bio?
that. I did
can't
not ask
wait.
for that.
Tell us how we're wrong and that we're a bunch of misogynistic pigs. I dare you.
I think we ended up balancing it out.
Yeah.
But I think that's all that we would need to plug at the moment.
Go read your Bibles.